Gentleman who is here this morning. We're very fortunate to have him here. Brian King spent some time with us last year in the system, not at this event, but here in District 34. And because he was just so widely and nicely received, we thought, what a nice opportunity to have him come back and to speak to an even broader audience. And so I'm just tickled to have Brian here, and we all are today. And Brian is a #1 best-selling author and a 25-year cancer survivor. Interestingly, he is an adult with dyslexia, ADHD, and Asperger's. He's also the father of 3 sons on the autism spectrum. He's known worldwide for his books and his highly engaging presentations that teach the power of connection and collaboration. His strategies empower others to overcome their differences so they can build powerful and lasting partnerships. And this is the best part. His motto is, "We're all in this together." Please join me in welcoming Brian King.
Good morning. First thing to make things easier, because I know I tend to cram a lot of content in my presentations, I'm recording every single word of this. So if you'd rather listen instead of taking notes, feel free to leave your name and email address on this clipboard at the end, and I'll be more than happy to send the recording to you. I also want to introduce a very special guest, the young man that sent me on the journey of understanding my own neurodiversity, how it impacts my everyday life. It opened up a door for my father, who didn't understand his own social challenges. And the young man who set me on that course and is one of my heroes is my oldest son, Zachary, who is with me here today. And he has graciously agreed to make himself available to you. If you want to ask questions about his personal experience, you can ask questions during this presentation, during the breakout session later, or just feel free to interrupt, because with my ADHD, I interrupt myself constantly. So don't feel like you're being rude by asking questions at any time. And since it's so early in the morning, hopefully you've all sufficiently caffeinated and carb-loaded, yes? Okay, so hopefully you're much more awake, alert, and prepared to do a little thinking. And in order to help keep you on your toes, or on your keisters as the case may be, feel free to engage, dialogue, conversate, because being passive recipients of knowledge teaches you nothing. You learn best when you're able to ask questions to clarify and get your specific needs met. So as much as I could talk about my own ideas all day long, that doesn't serve you. You are here to get strategies that you can apply to your life, yes? Then by all means ask the questions to give you what you came here to learn. Sound fair enough? So I'll dive into what it is I have learned. It's really important for people to begin understanding in order to create an overarching paradigm for how to parent their children. Because after all, that's why we're here, right? And how many of you were bestowed that wonderful little workbook that teaches you everything you need to know about parenting? You're given on day 1, right? How many of you have kids with special needs? Okay. And the rest of you just have typical pain in the behind kids, right? But they all have their challenges. And when you decide how you're going to be a parent, where do you begin? You do it the same old way that dear old mom and dad did that didn't work for you either? But it's all you know, so it's what you repeat. And how's that working for you so far? Like the results you're getting? No? The rest of you just staring? Unsure? You feel pretty hit or miss half the time? Sometimes you're successful and you ask yourself, how the heck did I do that? And can I repeat it? Well, the bottom line is the way we parent stems entirely from our own value set. What values are most important to us? Do we value compliance? Do what I tell you because I'm the parent? Do you value peace and quiet? Stop it. what you value most is where you will parent from. I work with parents over the years that some require discipline, some require peace. So the disciplinarian's always speaking up and setting rules. The person that requires peace wants no conflict. And they're always at odds with each other. And what they tend to raise together successfully are very anxious and confused children. So think about the values that you're using every single day when you begin. Because those values inform your habits. The way you talk to your child, the way you talk to yourself, the way you talk to your spouse, the way you perceive the world working all comes from your values. And your kids watch you live your life, and that's how they learn to live theirs. So take stock in how you begin your day with your kids, how you respond to them, how you talk to them, how you encourage or discourage them. That mindset, that philosophy drives everything and can either empower your child or teach them to live in fear. So in the handout before you, what you have is an outline of 10 habits that I've identified that people tend to get into. And those habits tend to boil down to a series of choices. At any given time, in good times and in stressful times, we always have choices in terms of how we're going to engage our kids. And the first choice we have to make is between responsibility or blame. Is it our philosophy that we own our lives? We own our decisions, our beliefs, our values, our actions, or are we victims in this world? Are we inclined to blame the weather for the way we feel? Are we inclined to blame somebody else for whether our day is a good day or a bad day? Do we get mad at the piece of furniture that we ran into because we weren't looking? Do we kick the dog when we're upset? Anytime you operate as a victim in front of your kids, you send the message that life happens to me and I am powerless to take action and create change. Responsibility means you own everything. You own your experience, you own your decisions, you own your thoughts. And therefore, you shape the course of your life. Now, are there times where you're going to fall off of that? All the time. Sometimes where maybe you feel a little overloaded, a little helpless, maybe. But what matters is, what is your predominant message? Is your predominant message responsibility, or is it blame? Or do you vacillate so much that your kids have no idea what you stand for? That's the first choice. The second choice we have to make is between proactivity and procrastination. Now, proactivity is what? Anyone? I don't imagine this is a foreign concept to you. Yes? Get it done. Just get it done. Take action. When? Now. ASAP. Procrastination is when you have that philosophy of, there's plenty of time. There's no rush. Why hurry? Then you wait till the last minute, and there's such a sense of urgency that you want to pull the fire alarm, you get incredibly anxious, and you drive everybody around you nuts. Anybody here subscribe to that approach? Thank you for your honesty. Why do that? Why do that? Come on. Is it laziness? Actually, procrastination takes a tremendous level of motivation. Okay? You are doing everything you can to avoid that task. That is a highly motivated state. But why do that? Fear. Fear? Who said that? Afraid of what?
Afraid of whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, or have to do, or need to do.
What are the things that you tend to fear? The things that bring joy into your life?
Sorry, I missed the question.
So what are the things that you tend to fear? Things that make you happy? What do you tend to fear?
Things that are difficult, things that make you sad,
things that are difficult or make you sad, things that you have already decided ahead of time are going to cause you some degree of discomfort or pain. Those are the things you procrastinate. Sometimes the pain is as simple as boredom. Boredom is a frustrating state. It's not life-threatening. You just don't enjoy it, so you put out things that are boring. Or things that you are afraid are going to make you look bad because, heaven forbid, you might need to ask for help from someone. We don't want to look like we can't do it all by ourselves, right? Now we'll tell our kids, ask for help if you need it, but not me. I'm one of the few that knows it all and can do it all and never need to self-advocate. But the rules are different for you because I'm the parent and you're the child. You ever see that little hypocritical value showing up from time to time? You say it, but you don't do it. But we all know what our kids learn better from, yes? From watching us live our lives, not from the script that we try to sell them on. There was a hand over here. Yes?
I was just going to ask about procrastination and control.
You were going to ask about procrastination and control.
Is control a part of procrastination?
Is control a part of it? How do you mean? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about a power struggle, parent-child power struggle.
Parent-child having power struggles. A very rare event in parenting. So where are you thinking that procrastination might meet the need of control when it comes to parents and children?
Control over their world or defiance.
So are you saying that a child might put something off a parent has requested because they want control?
I'm saying it not might, mine do.
Yours do that. Okay. So why are you asking me for? You already have the answer. Could that be the only reason they do it? Do you have typical children, or do your kids have ADD or spectrum or anything?
One has ADHD and multiple.
Okay, so are we talking about the one with ADHD?
We're talking about both, but I think it's for different reasons.
Okay. So is it possible the one with ADHD has more stuff going on than simple desire to defy you? Possibly. Might I make a suggestion to you?
Please.
There's a whole host of abilities that the typical, technically correctly wired brain has, and they're called executive functions. Are you familiar with that term? Executive functions are the abilities inherent in the prefrontal cortex that allow us to take organized action into the world, which means take our knowledge and use it in a proactive, organized way. In ADHD or the autism spectrum, those things are so scrambled and so miswired that what seems easy for everybody else seems like rocket science to a kid with ADHD. Like you give them a task and you say, okay, get started. And they sit. What are you waiting for? I don't know what to do. But I just explained to you what to do. I'm not trying to get started. There's an executive function called task initiation. It's the ability to take that first step. If that is miswired in the kid's brain, they will sit there and stare at a piece of paper and not know how to start it no matter how many times you explained it. They often need help taking the first step. My middle son, who has Asperger's, ADHD, and Tourette's, we discovered that he understood the idea of cleaning his room. He could say back to us our expectation to him. But heaven forbid if he was able to operationalize that, to get it out of his head and put it into action. So my wife, who's very creative, created a series of note cards. Put socks in hamper. Put specific toys on the shelf. He needed step by step by step to know what to do. And once she did that for him, bang, stand back and watch him work. Those are the tools he needed. I cannot live without my lists. My working memory stinks. Working memory is your ability to hold the knowledge in your head that you're going to be using to complete a task. So, schools or giving your kid directions. Okay, I want you to do step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay, Mom, what was that again? Working memory is slippery memory. If your kids have poor working memory, they don't hold it in their head long enough to use it. You ever have a kid that asks you the same question 3 or 4 times? Does that happen?
Yeah.
That's a working memory issue. Write it down. Otherwise, you're both going to be frustrated because the kid keeps asking you repeatedly. Yes?
I think you're also talking about learning styles, though, too, that not everyone's an auditory learner.
Learning styles is also an aspect of it, but I'm an auditory learner with lousy working memory. So even though you tell me you're giving it through my preferred channel, I still better write it down. So it's important to understand both pieces. So back to your question about, is it control? In general, parenting styles that remove choice from the child's life are disempowering, and we all like the element of choice. We don't like to be controlled, we don't like to be dominated. So you will have that natural resistance from kids who believe they've not been given a choice. They'll find little ways to push back, and procrastination might be one of them. But if there's something else going on there, some kind of dyslexia, some kind of ADHD, any kind of challenge that involves information processing, it's possible there's an executive functioning challenge at play as well. So that's something to consider. So in terms of working with your kids, the more they resist you, the more likely they are to hear what you said as an order, not a request, or as something that you said to remove choice, as opposed to giving them an opportunity. So much of it is how the message is received. So that's something to reflect upon too. I think in my breakout we'll get into that a little bit. Very good question, thanks for bringing it up. The next choice you have to make is between feedback or criticism. Is there a difference? What do you think the difference is?
Tone.
Tone? So I could say, honey, you're really stupid. And that's going to go over better? But I don't mean that in a bad way. But tone can be part of it. Really, the difference between feedback and criticism is what the person hears. But delivery is a big part of that. So I did a presentation in Maryland on Wednesday, and this was a big topic. We spent a lot of time on that with this group because there were a lot of supervisors who wanted to work better with employees and so on. And one thing they didn't put a lot of thought into was the fact that other people might actually misinterpret that. They believe that if I choose my words perfectly, I'll be understood perfectly. What does that assume? That we all use words the same way. That we assign the same meaning to everything. Anybody who's married, is that true? It doesn't work like that. We have our own meaning set. We create our own meaning. That's why clarification is so critical. It is important to understand right off the bat that if two people are involved in a conversation, misunderstandings will take place. Because we very rarely are on the same page. It's our conversation that gets us there. In my understanding, the main differences between feedback and criticism is designed to emphasize what was wrong, what wasn't good enough. Feedback is negotiated. Feedback is agreed upon between the two people. You will approach somebody and say, I'd like some feedback on this paper I just wrote. I'd like some feedback on this project I'm working on. I want you to tell me how to make it better. When you are given permission to give somebody input on something, that's feedback. Criticism typically is somebody walking up to you and say, man, you're messing this up. What are you doing? Let me do that for you. Or you self-appoint because you know better. One of the examples when I was out in Maryland is one young lady mentioned that some random person will come up in the store and give her parenting advice. And that's offensive. But when her friend does it, it's okay. One of the main differences is not only familiarity, she knows her friend, but her friend has permission to give her that information. The stranger doesn't. So permission is a big part. Even with my own boys. Yes, I'm the parent, but I ask, would you like me to offer you a suggestion? Can I give you some input on that? I ask for their permission before I give them any guidance. It increases the likelihood their ears will actually be open. Make sense? Okay. The next choice we have to make is between compassion or pity. Anybody been on the receiving end of pity before? Anybody given any pity? What on earth am I talking about?
Feeling sorry for something or somebody.
A little louder.
Feeling sorry for something for somebody.
Feeling sorry for somebody else. One of the inherent qualities of pity is that you see somebody as less than you in some way. That poor child living in squalor, that poor person in the Philippines, or that poor special needs kid. They're so worse off than I am. There's some conversation in your mind that puts you a little bit higher than that other person. And it's very difficult to empower somebody that you've already decided is less than. Whereas compassion begins with the understanding that we are equals. We are both human beings. We are the same. Compassion allows you to see some of your own experience in their experience. Does that make sense? That no matter what walk of life they're from, no matter what skin tone they have, their gender, their ethnic background, doesn't matter. What you see first and foremost is another human being sharing the human experience alongside you and realizing that there's something that you can learn from each other. Raise your hand. You're all parents, right? How many of you believe that your kids are the only ones learning in that relationship? Or are your kids raising you? Okay? You're at different parts in the journey, but you're still on the journey together. It's very reciprocal. You're still learning as you go. And the more you remember that, the more humility you will have. Because you will let go of the idea that you must know it all, learn it all, be it all. Because guess what? What's the message you're giving your kid? Nobody knows everything. You don't have to be right all the time. One of the most exciting things in my household is that we model curiosity. One of our kids asked us a question. Oh, I don't know. Where do we start looking to find that out? Let's go on an adventure. Telling your kid you don't know doesn't make them think you're stupid. It doesn't make them think that they can't count on you. When you respond with curiosity, you respond with enthusiasm to get the answer. That's what they need to learn how to do. They don't need to learn how to be right all the time. They need to learn how to be curious and to be empowered to satisfy the curiosity. Make sense? The next choice we have is between permission and imposition. We talked about that a little bit already. Where it really shows up in parenting is when we rescue. We see our child struggling and we step in and say, oh, let me do that. You're going to break something. Or in the classroom setting, your child is struggling, maybe an aide or a teacher steps in, no, that's wrong, I need to do this instead. When you step in and rescue in the middle of your child's process, what you're telling them is, I don't have confidence in you. I don't believe in your ability to do this, so I'm going to stop you right now and do it for you. Yes?
If you are asking if they're in the middle and something is upside down, you can say, can I help you or may I help you? Like this kind of question to make them feel more better.
You can ask, can I help you?
May I help?
But you can begin with, hey, what is it you're doing there? Can you explain to me what it is you're doing? Engage them in a dialogue about what their intention is. Then if it seems like they're stuck, then you can say, well, I have some ideas about maybe a way you could get what you're looking for. Would you like to hear them? Even the clients I work with, before I give them advice or a suggestion, I ask them if they want to hear it. Because there are some people that are just processing, they're talking out loud, they're not ready for a solution yet. And I don't want to assume that just because they called me for help, that means they want me to give them 50 strategies. Maybe they just want me to listen part of the time. Same with your kids. Are they ready to hear you? Or do they want 5 more minutes to try it themselves before coming to you? Because what they need to learn is self-advocacy. They need to learn, I've identified a problem. I've identified that I'm at the point where I don't know what to do anymore. Now I'll ask for help. As opposed to you running in and rescuing, which denies them that opportunity. permission is so key. Because just because you're the parent and they're the child doesn't necessarily mandate that you are in the role of authoritarian. Because in relationships, people are in our lives by permission, right? Not by entitlement. Asking for permission teaches your kids that they have a right to boundaries. They have a right to say no to people. They don't simply have to accept people in. One conversation I had with my mother many, many years ago is that simply because she wants physical affection from my kids doesn't mean she's entitled to it. They have a right to not kiss grandma if they don't feel like it. They are never, ever, ever to be guilt-tripped into physical affection. Because unfortunately, there are nasty people on this planet that will exploit that. You hear about them on the news all the time. So if you teach your kids they're obligated to give physical affection to an adult they don't want to give it to, that sets them up. So let them say no to you. Hug, kiss, whatever it is. Permission is key. The next choice is between forgiveness or guilt. One thing we all do as parents, and I admit I did it for a time when my boys were younger, is don't make me mad. Then whose fault is it if I get mad? It's my kid's fault now. I've just set them up. Don't make me mad. If I get angry, it's because I have no responsibility, no power over my own emotional states whatsoever. You have control. Or the weather makes me so sad, or this jerk who cut me off made me really mad right now. If we look back to the first choice, responsibility or blame, did something make you mad or did you get mad? If you get mad at something that you own, you responded that way. That was your personal choice. That was the habit you worked yourself into. A lot of kids learn to be guilty because they didn't please their parents. They didn't meet their parents' expectations. Zach and I have had conversations about that over the years because he's really, really set on making everyone proud. The one thing he fears is if he doesn't perform at top notch all the time, that we won't be proud of him anymore. And what's one thing that we've told you? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm trying to think because you say so much.
Yeah, I do talk a lot, yeah. But the one thing that we tell him, by and large, is we're proud that he's in the game. We're proud he's out there making the effort. If he doesn't get the A one time, but he learns from it, he gets back up, he's resilient, and he keeps moving forward, that's what makes us proud. It isn't just about the result. It's that he's out there and he continues doing it. So when your kids fall, it's not because they messed up, they failed, they didn't try hard enough. That's part of the game. If they're in it, there's as much pride to be put there as when they're standing on the podium to receive their certificate. Okay? Yes?
How does a child, we have a 5-year-old, and we try not to put, expect him to do certain things and put any pressure on him like that, but he gets frustrated and cries and doesn't want to do things that he doesn't know how to do yet, and we don't think we're doing anything to create that, but is there something in the child that makes some personalities more like that, or is it something more subconscious?
So you have a 5-year-old that gets frustrated when they can't do something right?
A lot of new things he doesn't want to try because I can't do it, or he hasn't tried it many times, so he hasn't mastered it yet, and then he avoids it. I mean, we've been very conscious not to, impose on him, like, we have to do this right, you're not doing it perfect. We try not to speak that way. I don't know where it's coming from. Is it something that a lot of children,
Is this your only child, a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
So it's the only child you've had so far? Okay. Do we know if this is a child that has any special needs or anything?
No.
Okay. Just your typical stubborn, independent-minded 5-year-old. Now, other parents in the room, let's tap into the wisdom here. You've got a 5-year-old that gets easily frustrated when everything doesn't work right the first time. Okay? Pretty much a shared experience. Now, even though you don't intend to model something, is your spouse with you? Okay. That's unfortunate.
I mean, he's home, he's not here today.
Let's see if he buys into this. A little bit of homework I want to give you and your husband. Watch each other. See if either of you models this unconsciously. Because are we always aware of the messages we're putting out there? Are we all walking around in an enlightened state, perfectly aware of everything we're doing? So even though we don't intend it, often those things get out there. So if we model impatience for our kids, they see us getting frustrated because we're trying to do something and it didn't work, they pick that up. And they begin to learn that's the rule. If it doesn't work the first time, I messed up. Another part of that might simply be that you have a child that needs some better modeling of resilience. They need to see you messing up and saying, well, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. What do we do now? And that's something that me and my wife are really deliberate about. We make a point of showing our kids when we mess up. We do our self-talk out loud so that they hear the conversation we're having and they see us get back up and move on. And they become increasingly resilient over the years because that's how we show them to do it. So if anything, you might want to deliberately mess up in front of your kid and let your child watch you be resilient to offer another way to do it. Make sense? Okay. The forgiveness portion starts where? With yourself. What do you need to forgive yourself for?
Being imperfect.
Who said that? Being imperfect. High five.
I'm very imperfect.
Beautiful. Because one thing that we are not taught to do when we're younger is to be human. We're told in one instance, nobody's perfect. And yet, we're consistently given messages of it's not good enough, try harder, do it again. So we're not quite sure what we're allowed to do, what we're being given permission to do. But if we're going to be teaching resilience, if we're going to be teaching nobody's perfect, if we're going to be teaching everybody makes mistakes, we need to model that. And we need to forgive ourselves first and foremost for any point in our lives believing that we needed to be perfect in order to be worth something. When we give ourselves compassion, we say, I'm human. I can be okay with that. When I have an imperfect moment, that is what I'm designed to do. By design, we are imperfect. If we knew everything, if we could do everything, we would have no need for anybody else. It's our imperfections that are little doorways that allow other people that are good at those things to come into our lives and make a contribution. Without those imperfections, there's no room for anybody else. And if that's one of your values, you will be much more at home with the idea that I'm less than perfect. Hooray! Let me find someone who's good at that and invite them into my life. Because you know what? They have some imperfections too. And maybe there are some things that I have that can add value to their life. And because of that little exchange, we have a relationship. And if you can learn to forgive yourself for your imperfections, you can teach your child how to be a little bit more patient with themselves. The next choice is between service or selfishness. The best way to explain that is it all about me or is it all about we? Is it about meeting my needs or ours? Being service-minded understands that if you're not taken care of, how can I be taken care of? And also, if I don't take care of myself, how can I take care of you? That if one person's suffering, we all suffer. It's not just about doing volunteer work one time a year so you can feel good about yourself and be selfish the rest of the time. It's an everyday habit. It stems from the idea that we're in this together. We do not live in a vacuum. We do not succeed on our own. We succeed in a context of a support network of people that help hold us up when we're struggling and help celebrate our successes. If I don't take care of these people, I'm potentially up the creek without a paddle. So I need to think about others as well. Selfishness, of course, is all me, 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 and those people suck the life out of the room and you don't want them at your party. Because there's no balance there. The next choice is between clarification or assumption. Any mind readers in the room? How many people were raised with this? If you really cared, you'd know what I wanted. You obviously don't know me as well as I thought you did, because you can't read my mind. How many of you have been on the receiving end of that or have been a perpetuator of that? One honest person in the room? Okay, 2, 3, 4. If you've ever done this in your life, raise your hand. Okay? The rest of you who didn't raise your hand, if you lie about that, you lie about other stuff too. Okay? Because the reality is, mind reading stems from a fear of self-advocacy. You're afraid to ask for what you want, so you put it on the other person to figure it out. Because if you don't put it out there, you don't have to hear what word? You don't have to hear no. You don't have to feel rejected, so you simply don't ask. You put it disproportionately on the other person. And when you put it on them and say, you should know, I shouldn't have to tell you, you're basically saying, I have decided to give up the right to ask for what I want, and it's all your fault. Doesn't that sound crazy? But that's what you're doing. Assuming that you know what they're going to say, assuming that you know what they're thinking, so you don't even have to have the conversation. Assuming that they know what you're thinking, or they should know what you're thinking, so you shouldn't even have to tell them. And then you have more and more misunderstandings, and whose fault is it? Theirs. Because you had all these assumptions running around in your head. One thing that's much to Zachary's chagrin is that Kathy is always playing that on him. Zachary, are you assuming that?
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. It's very difficult. Because the one thing that we're really trying to reinforce is question your guesses about things. Because that's all assumption is. It's a guess. It's a guess about what somebody else's answer might be, what their expectation might be. The only way you know whether your guess is correct is if you open your mouth and clarify. Clarification is the preferred way of communicating. See if what you expect is the case or hope is the case actually is the case. Ask a question. And if it's somebody that is routinely biting your head off when you clarify, then there's something wrong with the agreements that you have about how to talk to each other. It's not that communication in general is dangerous. It's communication with that person needs some refining. But a clarification always trumps assumption. Yes, I said always. Okay. The next choice is between gratitude or entitlement. What's the main difference between those two? I heard a voice. Great, it wasn't just in my head. Thank you. You have to earn it. You have to work for it. What if you don't work for it? What if somebody just sees that you're in need and decides to give to you? That's a gift. So do you respond with gratitude, or do you say, it's about time? One thing we run into is on birthdays and holidays, Christmas is coming up, who's been handed their list already? Okay? Entitlement around that. What do we talk about as far as gifts in our house?
Well, in terms of the expensive gifts I want, I got to work up the money for it.
Okay? One thing he's learned is what you said. Instead of saying, oh, can you give me the money, can you lend me the money? We've arranged some specific chores where he's got to earn it. And he's learning that money doesn't grow on trees. We are not willing to print it in our basement. I don't care how good the technology is these days. That there are certain things where if he wants it bad enough, he'll do the work to get it. And even then, he is grateful for the opportunities that we provide him to earn that money. He is grateful when we take him to go get it. Because I remind him all the time that everything, even though we're his parents, everything we give him by choice. We choose to take him. We choose to buy him the special snacks from the store. We choose to pay for cable every single month so he can watch his movies. He's entitled to none of it. We give it to him out of choice. And because of that, the only reasonable response is gratitude. Because there are a lot of things that we decide that we are entitled to, mostly because we're used to it. It's always been there, you expect it. The moment you are entitled is the moment you forget to say thank you. You forget to be grateful. Prime example, what is that you're holding in your hand?
Phone.
What kind of phone?
iPhone.
An iPhone. How many 15-year-olds have an iPhone?
Right now, several.
Several. Yeah. But what's different about your iPhone and the one your friends have?
I have to work for it every month.
You have to work for it every month.
If I try and slack off on this, you're going to cut off the bill.
If he tries and slack off on the jobs that earn it, I say, what's the customer service number for AT&T again? I just give, it's 611. And sometimes I just need to say that. Here's a math problem. What's 6 plus 1 plus 1? AT&T. And sometimes that's just enough of a prompt to remind him that, this doesn't happen by itself. This is something I'm earning. I better get up and earn it. So little things like that. To remind them that everything in life you are grateful for. I don't care how long you've been at your job. You're not owed it. You can be grateful every single time you wake up. When I hear people grumping on Facebook, oh, it's another Monday, I have to go to work. Really? You have to? I don't care if the person next to you in the cubicle is grumpy. Be grateful you have a job. Find some gratitude in there. Last choice. Between growth and stubbornness. Yes?
How do you model gratitude for toddlers and kindergartners?
How do you model gratitude for toddlers and kindergartners? Ask them to help you, ask them to do things for you. Can you get me that pencil? Can you go get mommy my purse? Can you go and do this? Thank you so much for helping. It really made things easier for me right now. Just a simple thank you.
They're so entitled.
They're so entitled if they're allowed to be. How many times do I run you and your brothers out like for a quick Mickey D's or something?
Not too often.
Not too often? Seriously? Do we need to start keeping a log?
You don't take us out too often. We hate that stuff.
Okay, how many Slurpee ones do we do?
Once every couple weeks, maybe.
Okay, so once every couple weeks, so that also minimizes the entitlement. But what is one of the expectations when we do those things?
Say thank you afterwards.
See, it's not just saying it like it's rote. Like you don't hold the door because you're supposed to. You hold the door for someone because you're taking a moment to let the other person know that you cared enough about them, even though they're a perfect stranger, to stop what you are doing and notice them. There's far more meaning behind holding a door open than simply doing what's polite. And when the gratitude expectation comes up for either Slurpee Run or Mickey D's or something else, don't say thank you because you're supposed to, say it because you mean it. Take the time to realize that we didn't have to be there. I got to hyper-focus on my computer for 2 more hours and say, sorry guys, not enough time now. But I prioritized it, I made the time, and I took you. So it's that acknowledgement. But it begins by modeling it, showing sincere gratitude. If they're entitled, give me an example of how your little one is entitled.
They're entitled to TV time. They're entitled to snacks.
They're entitled to snacks and TV time. If you give it to them without them having to do something in return, that teaches entitlement. If you make it something that's negotiated, like, okay, I'm more than happy to give it to you, but first, I need your help with this. You do it, keep doing it. Because we're talking about stubbornness versus growth. Some heads are harder than others. Okay? And it takes a little longer, yes.
You want to tell them some stories about my little me and entitlement that made you want to put my head through a wall?
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're kind of at the time. Zach invited me to tell some stories about his stubbornness, but we could definitely do that during the breakout session. One quick question. It better be real quick.
Where do you draw the line between working and responsibility? Especially, here in this community, I think there's a lot of kids who are give a fair amount of our children. And I understand the value of work and making them work for things. But I also understand there's a line that has to be drawn between, this is just your responsibility. You're part of the family. You've got homework. You have to do your homework. Where's that balance?
I don't know that I understand the question entirely. He was asking, there are some things you give your kids because you need to give them. There are certain things that are responsibilities in terms of being part of a family. That's a rule in our house too. One thing that would help you with that is you start taking an inventory yourself of all the things that you do, maybe partially for your own comfort that your kids benefit from. Certain foods you like to have in the house that are not absolutely necessary for survival. The big cable package, the internet, things like that, the kids just are passive recipients of. You can make that use of that all conditional. Because one thing I teach my kids is, not only do I give all these things by choice, but it's by virtue of our collaboration that I'm able to take care of myself and not be exhausted all the time, that I'm able to get my work done so I can do things for them. The more they take on, the more it allows me to be efficient so I can then have spare time to do things for them. They want McDonald's, they better clean the downstairs, because if I have to do it, that eats into McDonald's time. So it's a trade-off. I can do the dishes and then be exhausted so that I don't have time to talk to you after school, or I don't have time to run you on an errand, but if you do the dishes, now I have the time. So there's something that is inherently attached to that. They don't do it because you ask it. They don't do it because you demand it. They do it because there is a reciprocal payoff. It's back to the service or selfishness. If you help serve your family by doing the dishes and vacuuming the rug, it's so that we don't have to do it, and therefore we all have more time so we can do something together. This is something I can spend an hour on, but hopefully that kind of planted the seed a little bit. Okay, to finish things up here, I've just talked about 10 habits. There could be 50 or more. The main point of this conversation is to help you and encourage you to be much more aware of the choices you make every single day and how you interact with your kids, how you interact with your spouse. Because those choices mean the difference between connection and alienation in your relationship. Everything in the left-hand column invites people into your life. Responsibility, permission, clarification. Everything in the right-hand column pushes them away. So it's a choice between letting people in or pushing them out. And if you want to be connected to your child, if you want your child to be influenced by the best parts of you, that's what you need to model. You deserve it first and foremost, but more importantly, they deserve it. And hopefully by the end of this day today, you will have more tools than you ever expected, and when you leave here, you will feel like the more conscious, compelling, empowering parent that you always knew you could be. Have a wonderful day.